Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the third episode of the Muslim Bitcoiner podcast. Today we have our guest is Asif Shiraz. Asif Shiraz is the founder and managing director of Dinar Wakala, which is a Texas-based company that promotes a sound money standard. They're the first producers in the U.S. to issue gold dinars and silver dirhams. And Asif right now is currently working on a new project called KandairoBitcoin.com, which helps Pakistani citizens buy Bitcoin and create awareness around Bitcoin. Asif is also a Bitcoin enthusiast. He's written a fantastic essay for Bitcoin magazine titled Bitcoin, a Second Chance for the Muslim World. And that addresses the issue of Muslims adopting a Bitcoin standard. When we'll get into that essay as well into this podcast. So Asif, salam alaikum, welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam. Nice to be here.
Let's see. Let's start out with our first question that I have is, I know you've been an advocate for sound money for a long time. I guess before we start talking about Bitcoin, can we get into how you first started down in your journey talking about becoming interested in sound money? What led you down this path?
So I'm originally from Pakistan, right? I was living in the US, but back when I was used to live in Pakistan, there was a very interesting TV program by a certain guy named Zaid Hamid, and he talks about a lot of things, politics and other things. But along the way, he did a program on economics. And that was pretty much the first time I learned about how the banking system works. And now, like looking back at that, it reminds me, there's a very interesting book by John Kenneth Galbraith about money and the history of money. And he has a very interesting quote there. There's this businessman in the 18th century, and he learns about how banks work, and he closes all his businesses and he opens a bank, and he says, why didn't somebody tell me about this before? So I think anyone who really learns about how banks operate, how our money operates, it's always a revelation. And the moment you hear about it, there is rage, and there's like this strong feeling to really, do something about that. And that's what happened to me when I learned about all that. Like I said, we got to do something about that, and that's how I got involved in pretty much all the sound money movements of the time. Like at that time, this was pre-Bitcoin, right? This was 2007, 2008. And at that time, the only viable option that sound money advocates had was gold and silver. There was a very famous movement by Senator Ron Paul. He advocated to put the dollar back on gold and audit the Fed and the Ron Paul revolution and all that. So I got pretty interested in all the work that was happening in that side. And that's how I got into it. Then I realized there are like Muslim sound money movements also, and got involved in those. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. How long ago when you first started going
this
down?
was around 2007, 2008, I think. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. So I know there's like all kinds of movements with Muslims trying to like go back to a gold standard, and I know one of the movements, I guess, that you've talked about before is the gold dinar movement. Can you tell us about that, and like when the gold dinar movement started, and what are they trying to advocate for?
Yes. So I would say there are like two different undercurrents in the Muslim world. There is a larger group of people, like a number of religious scholars and experts in matter of economic law, who believe there is something not right about even the Islamic banks and the whole banking system. They want to do a reform. They just don't know what to do about it. So there's a general like feeling of rejection and disgust, and the need to search for an alternative. The only difference is, while they are still debating and searching, the gold dinar movement kind of came with an answer for the first time and said, let's go back to the money that we used to have, which is gold and silver. It's actually founded by a Muslim, a Scottish convert to Islam. His name was Sheikh Abdul Qadir. His European name was Ian Dallas. He's been in like very interesting personality. He used to be a TV actor. He's got some movies to his name too. And he was pretty much the first one. And that was back in 1960s, I think. So he converted to Islam, and he was pretty much the first person to say that your money is not right, so you got to fix that. And I've um, I've heard of one very interesting way of his disciples and his fans describing his role. There's a verse in the Quran, you may have heard that in Surah Yasin. It says, "And there came a man running from the far side of the town, and he said to the people, believe in the prophets." So the far side of the town, meaning like the Islamic civilization has been enriched by people from outside a lot. Like when even in Pakistan, like there are these Sufi saints, and they have these very popular, like thousands of people go to their shrines, and they have local names like Data Ganj Bakhsh and Lal Shahbaz Qalandar and all that. And very few people know that they're not from here. Like they came from Central Asia, they came from other places. So Islamic civilization, as I speak, was kind of like United States, where people from all over the world coming around and enriching that culture with their intellectual talent. So Sheikh Abdul Qadir is kind of like a person coming from the hinterlands and telling the mainland Muslims, hey, you've got it all wrong. So that's a very interesting way of describing that. And so he basically gave the theory, and then he had this very active, energetic student called Omar Vadillo. He's a Spanish Basque Muslim. He's also a convert and a very old-time disciple of the Sheikh. So they have been working for a long time in trying to prop up the gold dinar as an alternative to the traditional Islamic financing effort, the Islamic banking. And it's very interesting to know that they are pretty much as old as Islamic banking industry itself. So this is like 1970s and 80s where they started talking about this. And they even minted a gold dinar back in 1992 from 1991, I think, from Grenada. And they've been active in South Africa, in Malaysia, in Indonesia. That's where they had the largest effect, because I believe the Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad was very friendly towards. He had experienced like the thrashing of the ringgit by George Soros and all the manipulation that happened with the Malaysian ringgit. So he advocated the Muslims to go back to some kind of a sound money system. And so he couldn't do that politically in Malaysia, but he did turn a blind eye to letting all the other people do their own initiatives. And that's how like the gold dinar movement got a good like base in the Far East. Yeah.
Wow, that's actually kind of amazing, that bit of history, that that kind of gold dinar movement kind of started around the same time that Islamic banking became active. But as we can see, like between those, it's kind of like opposing viewpoints almost, because like Islamic banking is like, all right, let's try to Islamicize what we have in the current system, and then you have like this gold dinar movement that are like, no, we need to replace whatever system we have now and replace it with gold and silver. And it's interesting that kind of Islamic finance / Islamic banking side kind of won over that gold dinar movement, where right now that gold dinar movement, a lot of people, like even including myself, don't really know anything about it. That's right. Thank you for that. That's a very fascinating.
That is true. You know what? Now that we're talking a little history, I would actually say it goes even back. So there's something very peculiar to the Indian subcontinent. If you meet some people from Pakistan and India, there is this kind of a cultural thing that they have, and when you dig deeper, you realize it's an amazing realization. So let me take a bit to talk about that. So you may have seen like some people who say, I don't want to have gold because I have to pay zakat on gold. And so every year I'm going to lose some money because I have to pay the religious tax on that to as charity to the poor people. And it always amazed me that they think like that about gold, but then they would have a bank account and they're not worried about the bank account. And where did that come from? Your bank's money is also money.
Mhm.
So I dug deeper into that, and what I realized, and this very interesting, our money traditionally in the Muslim world always was gold and silver. Like it had different names, like in subcontinent, you call it maybe the Ashrafi or the rupiah, but the rupiah was a silver coin. The money was always hard, solid money. The fiat system, the paper system, is basically a legacy of colonialism. Like the British came and they pretty much captured all the countries and they established their institutions. And when they left, we didn't have any other option to run a country except just the next day you have to go back to the same central bank and start working the way they've left it. But when the British actually introduced the rupee, the Indian rupee, or their money, the paper money, our scholars back in the day, knowledgeable people who had been studying Persian and Arabic, that pristine original scholarship, when they confronted fiat money for the first time, they rejected it. They did not consider it money. And so in the 18th century, in the late 18th century, you dig deeper into the old books in some museum and you'll find a fatwa that says this is not money. And if it's not money, it's not wealth. And you don't have to pay zakat on wealth. They rejected that money. And so zakat is only on gold, it's not on paper money. And that notion lives on that, oh, gold, I have to pay zakat on that. So they were smart people, but they were like kind of overshadowed by the later generation, that the introduction of English language in India kind of broke the tradition. Like now people don't understand Arabic, now people don't understand Persian, they've been forced to learn English. And so the strength of that scholarship was lost along the way. And so
Mhm.
after it was only to be regained when we became independent and the British left. And that's when we first started asking ourselves, now we have inherited this, how do we Islamicize this? And that's when a few people started thinking along Islamic banking, and then the rest of them are just silently disapproving it, not really doing anything about it. But the Islamic banking industry is not really representative of the Muslim scholarship. Like pretty much colloquially, you talk to any person and they'll say, I don't trust this. It's just like a few vocal people and then big money that makes it the dominant Islamic solution to finance, but it isn't. And that's
Mm.
what the Gold Dinar movement is always trying to say, that this is not getting anywhere until you fix the money. So
Wow,
that's what
that's it's kind of interesting that it seems like that main motivation came from not wanting to pay zakat on gold, which is really interesting because it's like, I don't want to keep this real asset because I don't want to have to end up paying zakat on it, which is like
yeah,
you should pay zakat. That's like a good thing. You should want to do that. Wow, that's
right.
that's actually
And
that's very interesting.
this zakat is also another like religious rule, that it has to be, it cannot be deferred, like it cannot be paid through an IOU. And that was the other very strong rallying point of the Gold Dinar movement and the research of Sheikh Abdul Qadir and Omar Vadilio, that they explained in Sharia terms that if paper money is an IOU between the central bank and the government, you technically cannot pay zakat on it because
Mhm.
zakat has to be paid in real money. And this is just a promise to pay, it's not the actual money.
Yeah.
So
Wow, that's really interesting. I've heard you mention Umar Vidula, and that's actually one of the I read his fatwa on fiat money, and this is kind of great when I was like doing some research online, seeing like if there's any scholars that have like issued fatwa against fiat. He was kind of like the first ones that showed up, and he
that
had
showed up,
some
yeah.
very harsh things to say on fiat, which was very appropriate. So it's great that he was like kind of involved in that gold dinar movement. So I guess I kind of want to pivot conversation to talk about your organization, Dinar Wakala. What is Dinar Wakala, and can you tell us what the organization is trying to achieve?
So, like I mentioned, Sheikh Abdul Qadir had a lot of students, and there were a lot of them here in US also. Especially like not the immigrant Muslims, but really like the indigenous Muslims, a lot of people in the African American community. They were pretty much the first ones to adopt the gold dinar because they're like local Americans. They're not afraid of the government like an immigrant is, and so they don't care like what the consequence of their doing that is. So um, what they started doing was organize their local communities to kind of first import the dinar, but then we wanted to develop our own. And while we were searching for some way of like minting the dinar coin here in the US for these communities to use, we came across our local like American libertarian movements that were also doing the same thing. So here in Texas, there was a very interesting organization, very like libertarian kind of Ayn Rand philosophy. They even named their mint as Mulligan Mint. Mulligan is the main character in Atlas Shrugged, the book by Ayn Rand. So we got together with them, and they were doing a lot of interesting things. They were minting silver and gold coins, and they found their own very interesting approach to it. There are like these Indian reservations, which are practically like independent. Not practically, perhaps, but theoretically, they are independent, and they don't fall under the US jurisdiction. So they thought if they can have a casino there and not be affected by US law, so they can have a bank there and not affected by US law either. So we're going to go there and open a gold bank. So they partner with some leaders in the Lakota Indian Nation, and they issued a Lakota coin. And then they were minting like Ron Paul coins. And back in the day, because it's Texas, they had that when the whole thing about guns and all came up. I remember I saw a coin there which said it had that a firearm, and it said "Come and get it" or something. So, anyways, this is Texas, right? So we partner with them, and we said we are like Muslim American community, just like you've done it for the Lakota Nation. You should make us a coin, and we partnered with them, and we made the Islamic gold dinar in America, the very first gold dinar here. And then we talked to the folks in Malaysia, the gold dinar movement, and we said, you need to accept this as what the Malaysians were trying to do was to make a global standard, like a world Islamic mint, which would recognize quality coins as having the correct weight, and then they would be interchangeable. So they're local coins, but then you can also do international trade in them. And we got a recognition from them that the American dinar is acceptable in Malaysia and vice versa. So that was a very interesting phase in the gold dinar movement. Very exciting times. Pretty much the same time, they convinced a certain province, a state in Malaysia called Kelantan, and its sultan said, I'm going to issue, we can't, like the Malaysian government is not going to do it, but I'm going to issue state gold dinar coins, and I'm going to pay people in that. So there was an option for some people, government servants, to get their salary in gold dinars and like that. So there's a lot of activity happening at the time.
That Dinar Wakala organization, is that primarily just for Americans, or is that like an international, like?
It's just like we're based in Texas and we're just minting coins, but because US has very permissive laws around international shipments, so a lot of people couldn't buy them locally, and we would ship them from here. So
wow, okay, that's
so
awesome.
Our coins have made their way into like Germany, UK, India, Malaysia, pretty much, even Japan.
I guess like on that, I wanted to ask about like the current adoption of a gold standard among Muslims. Are the I mean I know like the gold dinar movement I guess is still active, but what's kind of the status of like Muslims internationally, whether it be in Pakistan or Malaysia or over here? What's the status on like Muslims adopting a gold standard? Have there been any like significant pushes or movements to try to get to a gold standard?
So it's not really, yeah. So I know what you're asking, gold standard, but you know the difference between gold backed money and actual gold money. So this was
Right.
not advocating a gold standard, but it was actual gold to be gold, to be money. You can say the greatest achievement has been awareness. Like a lot of people have learned about it. The gold dinar movement has generated a lot of awareness regarding the banking system. We have educated a lot of people. The actual usage of the coins is happening in certain areas, like local shops doing that, but it's not. I don't believe it's very significant. But then I can't say because I've never actually been to Malaysia, so that is
Wow.
where
So you mean like
most of the activity was.
you mean like there are actual shops that are like transacting in gold and silver coins?
They would accept it. Like if you go to
Wow.
them and you would give it to them, they would accept it. Nowadays, like the gold price fell also, and then there are a lot of regulatory hindrances in the movement of coins. So I would say the concept is there. It needs to be adopted by at some level. The government has to do it. So that's one of the approaches that the movement took. It talked to leadership in Turkey, with Egypt, and in Malaysia. So even in Pakistan, we even approached, like not we like as in me, but the people in the Gold Dinar movement. They even talked to Imran Khan. He's aware of this, but of course, um, a normal leader cannot do this alone. Like it takes a lot of effort. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I imagine it would be kind of hard to like, you could, someone like Imran Khan could like back up the national currency with gold, but it sounds like, what needs to happen, or what the gold dinar movement wanted to happen, was actually transact with the silver and gold coins themselves, so that you don't have kind of like a paper money that's kind of like another layer on top of gold. So I guess, just to like kind of get your opinion on it, do you think like having a gold standard today, do you think that would be possible if like enough Muslims like rallied behind it? Like maybe your view changed since you've discovered Bitcoin, but like what do you think about a gold standard?
Right. So before Bitcoin, like Peter Schiff was our like hero, right? He was such a vocal proponent of the sound money system. So in a larger sense, we are all libertarian kind of people who want sound money. It's a smaller division that some people like gold and some people like Bitcoin, and it's more a matter of expediency and what really is going to work and what cannot. But theoretically, any money is good money, right? We don't want to, there's no legal tender, right? We don't want to enforce a legal tender that now we have a gold standard, so go with gold, or now we have a Bitcoin standard, go with Bitcoin. We allow people to choose their money. And if they are practically choosing Bitcoin, that's great, and they should be. But then we can't say don't choose gold. Gold is a great option in certain ways. It is better than Bitcoin in certain ways, in the sense that it has a history which Bitcoin does not, and it is reachable to people. Like Bitcoin is more accessible, but then it is accessible for people who have like a cell phone. But there are so many people out there who don't even have a cell phone. But like we have to do a hybrid solution. We cannot say like one size fits everyone. Now, gold cannot match the value of Bitcoin in terms of its hedge against inflation, because gold cannot match Bitcoin in terms of its unstoppability or its convenience, like its transport. Like you can easily transfer it halfway around the world in a matter of seconds or minutes, seconds now, because of the Lightning Network. So it is great. Bitcoin is awesome, but I just don't like this fact that we need to, pit gold against Bitcoin. We don't need to. Like there are two excellent solutions. Gold has held its for so long, and it has worked for people. So I won't be surprised to see we come back to a time where some some level of organization, people's democratic organization adopts it, and they can do that. So it might be possible that we have a multi-currency standard again, where some people are using gold and some people are using Bitcoin. And
Yeah, that's
that'd be
actually what I
great.
was going to ask you next. Is that, I think, it sounds like to me that it's possible that we could have a, multiple currency world, or like, for example, where we have something where gold and Bitcoin are kind of like the two best monies that people use, and people might primarily end up just using gold as more of a store of value, but transact with Bitcoin, for example. So yeah, I could definitely see that. I mean, obviously, like, I'm way, way, way more bullish on Bitcoin than I am with gold, but yeah, I can definitely see the case for kind of like having both currencies being adopted. So I guess pivoting to Bitcoin, when did you first hear about it, and what was your initial reaction? Like, how did you have any negative views about Bitcoin when you first learned about it, and how did you overcome those views?
So actually, I knew about Bitcoin pretty much all along. Like, while we were focused on the gold dinar movement, people were telling us about Bitcoin. This was like 2011, 2012. And I was always looking at it favorably. Like, we we considered it as an ally. Like, a lot of people in the gold dinar movement back then were attacking Bitcoin. And they were attacking Bitcoin because of a very fundamental misconception that people failed to understand the actual reason of why we are rejecting paper money. And the actual reason of why we're rejecting paper money is because it's hidden in its other proper name, which is fiat money. So the real culprit here is legal tender. Like, your government is forcing you to use a certain money. And
Mhm.
that monopoly is what we don't like, which is not permitted in Islam, which um, is not like Sharia compliant, which is bad socially, economically, religiously, politically. So if you take the government's fiat away, you're only left with paper, and the worth of the paper will just be that, a paper, because it doesn't have the $100 value of now on it. So the bad thing about fiat money is not that it's made of paper. The bad thing is that somebody is enforcing it and giving it an artificial value. So you take that away, then paper money is halal too. Like, you're
Mhm.
welcome to trade in paper if somebody's willing to accept it from you. But
Mhm.
without the government's fiat, nobody's going to give it any value. So when they looked at paper money and they said, ooh, paper is bad because it doesn't have something behind it. And so Bitcoin is also bad because it doesn't have something behind it. But
Mhm.
that was the wrong logic. We don't reject paper because it doesn't have something behind it. So Bitcoin is a thing in itself. It doesn't need anything to be behind it. You're welcome to adopt it as money or not. You can adopt anything as money. You can start trading in pencils and that'll become money. So nobody's forcing you to use Bitcoin, and nobody can prevent you from using Bitcoin. So it's your choice. And Bitcoin has proven that it is the choice of the people all around the world. It has established itself, and now it practically is money. So the reason why they were opposing Bitcoin was because they thought, oh, it's virtual. And that's not a problem. It's being virtual is neither prohibited in Sharia. Like, Sharia recognizes virtual things as being sellable and as expression of wealth. For example, in Sharia, traditionally, wealth is of three kinds. It is ayn, it is dain, and then it is the usufruct of things. It's the manfaat of things. So a manfaat is basically some value that you generate. Like, you rent a house, you're not selling the house, but you are selling the privilege to live in the house. So that ability to live in a certain house for 1 month is virtual. Like, you can't touch, this is my privilege here to live in a house. You can sell that. You can sell copyright, you can sell patents, you can sell music. So you can sell Bitcoin also. So to have wealth or to have value, it doesn't need to have a physical manifestation or something. So that was what misled people about Bitcoin in the gold dinar movement. And I have like my Facebook posts as far as back as 2013, 14, and I'm defending Bitcoin to the dinarists and saying, hey, don't speak bad about that. And today I say to the Bitcoiners, don't speak bad about the gold one. So we're all in this together. But yeah, so I was aware of that, and I always looked at it favorably. I actually even had a account in Mount Gox. I never bought any Bitcoin there, but yeah. So
Wow, yeah, that's definitely kind of like the biggest criticism I noticed from gold bugs when it comes to Bitcoin, especially this whole like, it doesn't have intrinsic value, it's not tangible, and they just kind of automatically like write it off as just like another, fiat derivative, even though I think it helps to look at money from its monetary properties. Yeah, that's found it very interesting that you were a very early adopter of Bitcoin while being in kind of the gold dinar movement. I guess what do you think are kind of like the biggest obstacles for Muslims when it comes to adopting the Bitcoin standard? Do you think the obstacle primarily comes from government, scholars, or just like the misinformation? Where do you think the obstacles come from?
I think one of the obstacles is definitely the scholars, because they don't understand it yet, and we need to educate them. Although I have lately started to think that they don't really matter much. And the reason why they don't matter much is because it's like they are not the horse, they are the cart. And when the Islamic banking developed, it did not develop because the scholars wanted an Islamic system. It developed because, and on Islamic banking, you can, like, you may have heard like Haris Irfan and Safdar Alam and these like people who have been into banking. And I'm just repeating some of the things I've learned from them, but also, yeah, studied over time. And what I realized is like the banks want to tap the Islamic market. And they say, oh, if these people don't like regular banking, let's give them an Islamic package, and they're going to buy that. So the scholars are just paid to issue these fatwas, and they will, obviously there are people of integrity there, so they're not going to give you a fake fatwa. So you have to deceive them in some way and get it out from them. But the thing is, what is leading the movement is not the scholars themselves. It's like institutions that are doing business in that industry, and so the scholars come along and help them. So if we have like some visionaries, entrepreneurs who want to invest in Bitcoin in the Muslim world, the scholars will follow. You'll just have to pay some scholars and they're going to give you a favorable fatwa. I'm not saying we should do that. But what I mean to say is we don't have to wait for scholars to start favoring Bitcoin and then go out and developing systems. We should go out and start developing systems. People will see its value, people will see its convenience, and they will come. And when people come, some of them will come because they don't care about the scholars. They care about the money. They want to save their money, and Bitcoin will help them do that. And some of them will come because once the institutions are established, the scholars will follow. And that's also one of the psychological hindrances that the scholars have. They say, oh, you're all just trading, and that's where like this whole shit coining and everything is impacted, has skewed the way people see Bitcoin, because they just look at it as another crypto. And they say like there's no real trading going on, like trading in the sense like a day-to-day trading. I cannot go out and buy eggs with Bitcoin. You're just like doing this margin trading on exchanges and making and losing money and all that. So if we develop actual systems where there's a lightning based payment system, there's shops that are offering things to sell in Bitcoin, if you just go out and start adopting it, the scholars will realize that it has become a money in the urf sense, and they're going to start looking at it favorable, because then they'll see that it's actual money. It's not just some virtual hypothetical thing where people just gamble on. So that is going to pave the way for a positive change of heart, I think, from the people.
Yeah, subhanallah, like recently I've just been kind of like thinking about how Muslims will eventually adopt Bitcoin, inshallah. And yeah, I've also had kind of that same thought about I don't think, the adoption is going to primarily come from scholars saying it's okay, guys, it's halal, go ahead and use it. Like, I think, like you said, they're going to be like institutions, I think, that are going to like pave the way for adopting Bitcoin. And then scholars will just kind of have to come on board, and they'll, I think they're eventually just going to be like, oh yeah, it was halal the whole time. See, like, it wasn't even an issue. But I mean, who knows how it'll play out. But yeah, I see organizations like, like you said, entrepreneurs that are looking to build on top of Bitcoin, that are integrating Bitcoin into their, payment processing. And I also see, I've mentioned this in another podcast about nonprofit organizations. I think you'll start to see some Muslim-based nonprofit organizations start to accept Bitcoin as a way to not just accept donations, but as also as a store of value. Because if you're a nonprofit organization, you have to have reserves in order to kind of further whatever goal that you have for your nonprofit. So I think we're going to kind of like, I think we'll see adoption in the Muslim world come primarily from those two places, from businesses as well as nonprofit organizations.
That's actually a very good point. Yeah, nonprofits also are kind of like, it's not somebody's money, right? It's the foundation's money. So you can bear a certain price fluctuation or something because you don't care. It's the foundation's money. And so you can use Bitcoin and pave the way for that. Yeah. Regarding the scholars, it's already started happening. So there's this very famous person, Mufti Taqi Usmani. People like really look up to him. And I remember he has this very clear statement from a few years back or more. He said like Bitcoin is not it's haram and don't do it. And then I heard more recently somebody asked him the question again, and he said, I have my judgment suspended about it. So you already see from being very strongly negative to a little bit negative, coming back neutral, rethinking. And as more and more people are going to ask him, they're going to come around. So
yeah, definitely. And I think like you said, scholars will just have to kind of just kind of have to adopt. Not to say that the scholars are irrelevant, but just like in terms of trying to like get off, a lot of Muslims are becoming increasingly frustrated with the current system and how it's set up. And I think a lot of Muslims are starting to wake up how like riba is involved with fiat, and it's kind of hard. As Saifuddin, I think, said that being a Muslim is like a tax. You have like a tax on you in a fiat world. And I think Muslims are kind of like looking for alternative ways. And, they're not, from the Muslims that I talk to in real life, like they're not very impressed with Islamic banking and Islamic finance. So, there's obviously the gold solution, which, that's also an option. But then there's also this Bitcoin thing. And that's kind of the thing that I like to advocate for is, here's this Bitcoin thing that helps you not only protect your wealth, but it's also a way to protect you against riba as well. So
I think the other great thing about Bitcoin is it is where you wish or want to be. And so like you want to eat cake, right? And there is a cake in the fridge. And instead of just eating the cake in the fridge, you say, ooh, let me get some eggs and let me get some sugar and let me get some flour and I'm going to make myself a cake. So the gold dinar movement has a long way to get where Bitcoin already has reached. So the ultimate goal is you want to protect people's wealth. You want to give them a hedge against inflation because their money is being robbed. And so you want to first educate people about sound money. You want to convince the government about the benefit of sound money, tell them about gold and silver, establishments, bring up a gold standard. And then finally, you get to a stage where people are ready to use that government supported, a lot of effort gone into it. Finally, you get to a point where a shop is willing to take a silver coin from you and give you bread. It can happen right now with Bitcoin. You can do it with your app. So we are already there where the gold dinar movement is trying to get. So this battle has been won. So let's just like use it to our advantage. So that's the great thing about Bitcoin. It has done what so many could not do. Like this movement has achieved results, and that's the great thing about it.
I totally agree with that. So I guess before we close out, can you tell us a bit about your current project that you're working on, where you're trying to get trying to get people in Pakistan to adopt Bitcoin? What does that organization do?
So Pakistan has banned cryptocurrencies in general and Bitcoin in particular, actually, because they are terribly afraid of flight of capital if you allow it. Now, we know that the Pakistani currency is devaluing every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like a couple of months back, the dollar was 170 rupees, and now it's like almost 210 rupees. So what is happening in Pakistan is people are using Binance P2P or Paxful or local Bitcoin and trying to buy from each other, or if they have relatives abroad, they can ask them to get them. But you can't really buy Bitcoin in Pakistan using local currency. So the government doesn't allow any exchanges or any institution to set up like that. So I thought, well, I'm not in Pakistan, I'm in Texas, and let's base something out of Texas. And we're going to focus on educating and helping people buy Bitcoin, even if it's like, we don't need to settle, like we can keep a treasury in Pakistan and send them Bitcoins from the US, or like there's so many different ways we can at least start helping people to get their hands on Bitcoin. And that's what we're trying to do. Not something big, like just a personal or small level effort to say, if you want to buy, we'll help you buy. Mm-hmm. And if you want to learn about it, we'll teach you. And just collect some resources, hook people together, and gradually we'll see where it goes. But it's just a start. Like we need some visibility locally, that and also to separate it from crypto in general, like this purely like Bitcoin. Let's do that. So let's see where it goes. Yeah.
Inshallah. Yeah, I think that's definitely the approach to go with. And I think even just being able to provide resources, educational resources, if someone can reach out and say, hey, I'm interested in this Bitcoin thing, where can I learn about it and how can I buy it? And I think that's awesome that you're kind of doing that effort to get people in Pakistan to adopt Bitcoin. I guess before we close out, where can people find you? How do people get in contact with you?
On Twitter, that'll be simpler.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, you guys can follow Asif Shiraz on Twitter, and you can also look up Dinar Wakala and also contact him through there. So I guess that we'll go ahead and conclude here. Thank you, Asif, for coming on the show. It was a pleasure to have you.
And actually, thank you very much for doing all of this. Like, I see your posts and you are very instrumental in generating awareness. So I'm already seeing like your following is rising, and it's very useful. So keep doing this.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.